Good morning and welcome to worship from the Old Ship Meeting House. We begin as we do each week. We begin with a chime and then with our prelude. This morning, The Water is Wide, of course, played by Christopher. We begin. We gather at this time to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, the goodness, and the beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and of hope, and to reclaim a vision of an earth made fair with all her people one. We gather, and it is good so to gather. Our introit, Rise by Ariana Abella, Katie Weintraub will sing.
I will rise with all my daughters. I will rise.
With thanks to Katie, we welcome into our worship circle Catherine Mays, who has our chalice lighting words this morning. Thanks, Catherine.
Morning, everyone. It's May. It's getting warmer. My raised garden beds are prepared. The garlic shoots are pushing up out of the dark brown earth. The azaleas are flowering. Tomato plants started from seeds are 6 inches tall now. Green leaves are emerging from the gray branches of the blueberry tree that feeds only the birds. I light the chalice today in celebration of whatever is showing signs of rebirth and beginnings in your garden, in your planters, in your pots by your kitchen windows. May it bring you hope and peace and respite.
Thank you, Catherine. In that spirit of renewal, life, we light the chalice of our faith. We're invited to sing together. It's simple enough, old spiritual, to sing. Guide My Feet is the hymn. It's number 348. If you have a hymn book, perhaps you've downloaded it. Just want to say a word, a reminder that like much language, this language is metaphor. We cannot all run or even walk. And sometimes we are all in need of guidance and strength from the unnameable source. And one final thought, though this is a hymn from the tradition of Black spirituals, the message is universal. We all sometimes, if not often, need guidance. Guide My Feet, number 348. Christopher. Thank you all for singing. We know you were. Welcome once again. Welcome to everyone to worship from our Old Ship Meeting House. You are all in the meeting house in a manner of speaking this morning as we gather for worship. Old Ship is the worshiping home of First Parish in Hingham, Massachusetts, Unitarian Universalist, and I'm the minister, Reverend Ken Reed Brown. We're pleased to have with us old timers as well as newcomers. If you are new to us, we invite you to get to know us a little bit to begin with by exploring on our website, oldshipchurch.org. And we look forward to getting to know you. There are a couple of announcements. First, as always these days, our fellowship hour will immediately follow the service on this same Zoom link. So just stay with us if you'd like to engage in conversation in small groups and in the large group for fellowship time. Two other announcements this week. On Tuesday evening, our monthly first Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock in the evening, the Kaylee, a song and poetry circle. Everyone is invited. You can find the Zoom link on our website, or you can send me an email. And the spring poetry class that Elizabeth, Torrey, and I will be leading begins on Wednesday, one session each week for 5 weeks, beginning each week at 4 o'clock for about 90 minutes. Send me an email if you would like to join that group or have any questions about it. Here end the announcements. Chloe Bride, our Director of Religious Education, has Time for All Ages, a story for us this morning. Chloe.
Good morning, everyone. I have a story for you all that I hope fits within the theme of this morning. It's a book based on a poem, and it's by an African-American Black author, and I hope you all like it. So it's called A Place Inside of Me, and it was written by Zetta Elliott. Oh, there we go. There is a place inside of me, a space deep down inside of me where all my feelings hide. They wait there in the darkness, a knot of electric emotion, seething, sizzling, burning, until I find the strength to reach inside of me. There is a joy inside of me, a happiness deep down inside of me that glows bright and warm as the sun and shines delight on everything I see. There is sorrow inside of me, a sadness deep down inside of me that is cold and dark as watery grave at the bottom of the sea. There is fear inside of me, a terror deep down inside of me that stalks me like a sinister shadow and seeps like poison into my dreams. There is anger inside of me, a fury deep down inside of me that is sharp enough to slice through air, flesh, bone, and concrete. And yet there is hunger inside of me, a yearning deep down inside of me that refuses to be silenced or bound with chains and insists on being free. Free. There is pride inside of me, no shame deep down inside of me, for I know how long and hard we have struggled, and against all odds, my people have emerged strong, triumphant, and beautiful. There is peace inside of me, a calm deep down inside of me that flows through my soul like a tranquil stream and hushes my whispering doubts. There's compassion inside of me, a tender deep down inside of me that tries to heal the wounds of the past and forgive, in spite of the lingering pain. There's still hope inside of me, a promise deep down inside of me that I will use my life to help others and they will help me in return. For there is love inside of me, true love deep down inside of me. I am in love with my people, all people, plus trees, sparrows, sunlight, and the rain that falls like a blessing from above. And when I look inside of me to that place deep down inside of me, I remember to love myself most of all. And when I look inside of me to that place deep down inside of me, I remember to love myself most of all. So thank you, everyone. I liked this story because I think it's a good reminder that when anything happens, we get all the different emotions that we feel with it. Love, anger, sorrow, hope, peace, everything. So just a reminder to let yourself feel all of that. That's what's healthy for us. Happy Sunday.
Thank you, Chloe. What a beautiful choice of story and important message as well. Thank you. We come to our time of sharing joys, sorrows, and concerns. As always, you're invited to, in the chat, to name a joy or a sorrow or a concern, or simply to hold joys and sorrows in your hearts. A few of you have sent joy, sorrow, and so on to me, and I will name those. Karen Snyder wants a candle of remembrance. She says, for my father, Bob Snyder, who had he lived, would have turned 93 today. This from Rick Hall, a candle of concern. He writes, hope and healing for Tamara Hall. She's been in a hospital near her home in Maryland for over 4 weeks, mostly in the ICU, following an emergency surgical procedure. And in addition, while she was in the hospital, her father passed away. For her, Rick writes, and for all who live the daily inextricable challenge created by the combination of emotional and physical pain, a hope for peace, that they find a peace in life despite a perception that there may be no hope. And Chloe has asked that we light a candle for the people of India in the midst of one of the worst waves of the virus, as we all know. Chloe's partner has friends and family in India. Old Ship member Shuma Chakravarti, her brothers and other family and friends also live in India. We light a candle holding them all in our hearts and our prayers. And this, a candle of concern related to the appearance of swastikas on a building in Weymouth, on a building in Norwell, surrounding communities. Rabbi Shira Joseph and Cantor Stephen Weiss from here in Hingham have brought this to the attention of all their colleagues and all of us in the Hingham Hall Religious Leaders Association, that we in our congregations might share this deep sense of concern. And in the midst of this, they invite us to share this prayer, which they have sent along. Peace will come through the grace of God and the actions of humanity, compassion and kindness, forgiveness and love, patience and gratitude, justice and mercy, empathy and understanding, each act a yearning, each deed a longing for wholeness and tranquility in our world. You who makes peace in the highest heavens, guide our hearts and our hands in service to each other and your world, to bring peace to all the nations of the earth, all people everywhere. And so I light a candle for this prayer of peace and deeply felt concern. Candles will represent these 4 that have been named, and any in chat, and any that we hold in our hearts. May we gather our hearts and minds in a time of meditation, prayer, and shared silence. Meditation. Seeking the stillness that rests always beneath the surface of our minds and hearts, our beings. Meditation, just waiting till the stillness rises beneath the waves. And peace. Stillness and a measure of peace from which prayers grow, yearnings of our hearts. Prayers in the midst of the joys and sorrows named this morning, that hate may be changed by love and to love, that suffering and be assuaged, that those who grieve find comfort. Prayers of our hearts for all in need, from our dearest ones, if they are in need, to our sisters and brothers, wherever they are on our shared earth home. Prayers for peace, for healing, that all might know care, compassion, kindness, that we might bring care, compassion, kindness. May our meditations and prayers continue in shared silence. Rich Jensen will be sharing our anthem this morning, I'm Gonna Live So God Can Use Me, another African-American spiritual. Rich.
I'm gonna live so God can use me anytime and anywhere. I'm gonna live so God can use me anytime and anywhere. I'm gonna live, I'm gonna live, I'm gonna work, so I'm gonna work. God can use me anytime, anytime, anywhere, anywhere. I'm gonna work, so I'm gonna work. God can use me anytime, anytime, anywhere, anywhere. I'm gonna pray, so I'm gonna pray. God can use me anytime,
Anytime.
Anywhere. I'm gonna praise.
I'm gonna praise.
God can use me anytime, anywhere. I'm gonna sing.
I'm gonna sing.
God can use me anytime,
Anytime.
anywhere. I'm gonna sing.
I'm gonna sing.
God can use me anytime, and anywhere. Anytime,
Anytime.
and anywhere.
And thank you, Rich. The many voices of Rich Jensen. I see the applause. We have two readings this morning. The first will be shared by David Nelson. David, thanks so much for sharing this reading.
Our first reading this morning is from the Black American poet Ross Gay. A small needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means, perhaps, that with his very large hands, perhaps, in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which, most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. Here ends the reading.
Thank you, David. It deserves a breath. And we move to our second reading, this from Elizabeth Torrey. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Second reading is a poem by Elizabeth Alexander entitled Ars Poetica number 100. I believe poetry, I tell my students, is idiosyncratic. Poetry is where we are ourselves. Though Sterling Brown said every eye is a dramatic eye, digging in the clam flats for the shell that snaps, emptying the proverbial pocketbook. Poetry is what you find in the dirt in the corner, over here on the bus. God in the details, the only way to get from here to there. Poetry, and now my voice is rising, it's not all love, 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 and I'm sorry the dog died. Poetry, here I hear myself loudest, is the human voice. And are we not of interest to each other? Are we not of interest to each other? Here ends the reading.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you both for the readings this morning. Our offering. We've entered a new month, and this means we have opened the door for a new special outreach offering each week. During our time and following our time of offering and offertory, we're invited to make contributions, either or both, to the ongoing ministries, the many ministries of our congregation, or to the special outreach of the particular month. This month, the outreach offering goes to the Hingham Unity Council. This group, which began in 2019, focuses on developing programming to address core issues such as racial diversity, equity, inclusion, socioeconomic disparities, issues related to LGBTQIA rights, and so on. You can learn more about the group at the Hingham Unity Council website. You can do the search and you can make your donation, any kind of donation, online on our own website, oldshipchurch.org. Find the donate link and button. Our offertory this morning, sung by Heather Nolasco, Show Us How to Love by Mark Miller.
Hearts open, minds awake, change us now for heaven's sake. Leave us not alone in hatred's wake. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Hearts open, souls awake, rules we made we now must break with our very own lives at stake. We must learn to love. We must learn to love. We must learn. We must learn to love. Eyes open, shocked awake, much to learn from our mistakes. Draw us closer in our heartache. Show us how to love. 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 Show us how to
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. How beautiful. We are so blessed with our musicians, from Christopher, who leads us, to all of our soloists, Heather and Rich and Katie, from whom we heard this morning, and Chris Meyer, and eventually from our volunteer choir when we are able to regather with singing. Thank you. Show us how to love. We've just heard, and it might be that love begins with one of the lines in Elizabeth Alexander's poem that we heard, where she ends, that poetry is the human voice, and are we not of interest to each other? Are we not of interest? I love that line, particularly arriving in our ears as it does after we've heard, among other things, also heard that poetry is what you find in the dirt, in the corner, over here on the bus, God in the details. And are we not of interest to each other? A line which opens the door to other poems, such as the one we heard just before that one from Ross Gay, A Small Needful Fact, drawing our attention to the life as well as to the death, the killing of Eric Garner. For we learn not only about his There aren't words to describe it, his terrible killing at the hands of police, but of his life and this small needful fact about his life, that he once worked for Parks and Rec in the horticultural department, planting, most likely, as so many are doing this season. So we're invited to hold Eric Garner in our hearts, not only or even primarily in relation to or memory of his death on the ground, straining for breath, but perhaps remember him planting, as so many do. A fellow human being human. Are we not of interest to each other? I've been reading recently, as Elizabeth Torrey has, my co-leader, really our leader in the upcoming poetry class, been reading dozens and dozens of poems from 250 years of struggle and song. The subtitle of the new anthology, African American Poetry, edited by Kevin Young. It's the book that we've been drawing from for our spring poetry class, Lift Every Voice. These poems are filled to overflowing with every dimension of Black life in America, enslavement, Jim Crow, prisons, blues and jazz, meals shared, celebrations, sorrow, fear, love, hope, joy. Some of it's brutally graphic, some of it, even most, is poignant deeply. Some is exuberantly joyful. All of it is filled with life, Black life to be sure, but that means a dimension of American life, the life we all share in so many different ways. And reading these poems in these recent weeks has brought home freshly to me how poetry speaks to and from the heart in ways that most prose simply does not, cannot by its nature, whether history, fiction, nonfiction, of whatever kind, essays. And though we do need all of this from our Black writers, especially our writers of color these days, I know that I need it as a white man in a nation, in our nation, with all the unearned privilege that this represents. I need it all. So during this year of renewed rising for racial justice, all the reading that I've been doing in this regard has been immensely valuable, often illuminating, eye-opening. Poetry, all of this, and also heart-opening. There are indeed things poetry can say, or ways that poetry has of saying it that prose cannot. The beloved white New England poet Robert Frost was once asked about a particular poem, so what does it mean? And I couldn't find the exact quote, but he answered something like, well, if I could tell you the meaning of the poem, I wouldn't have had to write the poem. Exactly. Another way of putting it is that if we are indeed of interest to each other, then we ought to use whatever forms or ways we have in order to deeply listen to one another, understand each other as well as one can without being inside someone else's skin. In his talk given to Old Ship this past week, Professor Ashok Gangadine was asked by one of you how we can move from all the ways in which we are polarized, all the ways in which we divide ourselves into us and them, separate and opposed to one another, whether individually and as a society, as humans, move towards unity, a more perfect union. The first step, he said, and of course he didn't invent this, but in the context of everything he was saying, it came with renewed power. The first step is listening, stepping back and allowing the other person's reality and perspective, where they're coming from, as we often put it, to be what it is, so that we might be more likely to be able to enter into genuine dialogue with them rather than just speaking at each other. Ashok said this applies to everything from a marriage to any personal relationship, to communities, to our nation, to the world. And further, it has to do with the essential, as he puts it, the essential maturation of the human species, awakening of the global mind. And isn't it the case that we all too often so unconsciously contribute to polarization and separation, to begin with simply and sadly by labeling instead of listening, labeling instead of listening, labeling other people, other parties, other ethnic groups, and so on, as if the label, whatever it is all that that person or that group is. We even label other beings, other forms of life in the natural world, as if the label captures all the complexity. The American Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron, some of us have been reading one of her works this year. She tells a story of two Tibetan teachers, masters of more or less our own time, sitting outside together, just enjoying themselves, happy to be with one another. And at one point, one of them turns to the other and pointing, he says, "They call that a tree." And both of them roared with laughter. As Pema Chodron went on to reflect, she wrote, "The two enlightened teachers thought it was a riot, that this complex changing phenomenon with all its leaves and bark and fragrance could be thought of merely as tree." She could, of course, have gone on to name not only the beautiful complexity of that tree, of any tree, but of the way in which that complexity is woven into the complexity of all life, all other beings, if you will, in the forest, in the woods, on our suburban lawns, and of course, with our lives, breathing out so we can breathe in, offering shade, and so much more for we who are human, for all life. One has to wonder, only slightly tangentially, would we be facing the climate crisis as we are if a long time ago, if we had learned a long time ago to consciously and appreciatively breathe together with the trees, with other green and growing things, breathing out so that we can breathe in, rather than simply seeing trees as wood for our fires and for our homes. Well, as I've said, we do this sort of labeling and categorizing of people all the time. Labeling someone a Republican, a Democrat, conservative, progressive, black or white, as if such categories could capture the wholeness, the whole story of who we are, or even much of the story whatsoever, rather than whether it's through poetry or simply listening to each other. Hearing another's story, we must learn to enter more fully into the wholeness and fullness of others' lives. Our lives do depend on it. The flourishing of life depends on it. Yes, we are different from one another. That's not my point. In fact, part of the point is we are different from one another, each unique, even groups of people unique from other groups, but no label captures much of that. Listening can. And it can start pretty close to home. Some of you may remember that a few years ago when we had first hung our Black Lives Matter banner outside the meeting house here, after a week or two, a neighbor appeared at the foot of the meeting house driveway, the church driveway, on Sunday mornings when we were inside worshiping, and he simply stood there holding a sign that said, "All lives matter." Well, he did this for several weeks, as I say, and eventually one of you had the wisdom and kindness to, after the service, invite him to our fellowship hour. And over coffee, we learned more of his story. I hope he learned more of ours. I expect he did. And we became friends. I expect we still had different opinions. He was no longer, though, just someone with a sign and a contrary opinion to many of ours. Are we not of interest to each other? So whether through personal connection or poetry or prose, not only can we listen to one another, remember Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven, the reign of God, is spread before you. Had you eyes to see and ears to hear." So maybe he was talking, among other things, or even primarily about ears to hear one another and to experience the preciousness, the beauty of one another. That's the kingdom. Maybe he meant to see and hear one another, to listen and thereby enter into deeper relationship with one another. Not only can we do this, we must. Again, I say we must, at least if we ourselves are interested in growing into greater wholeness. For it seems to me that we individually are not whole and healed unless we are contributing to and part of the wholeness and healing of others. Indeed, of the fabric of our shared lives, and contributing first, simply and powerfully, by listening and learning. In another of Elizabeth Alexander's poems, as I begin to draw towards the close for this morning, her poem Praise Song for the Day was given, as many of you will remember, at the inauguration of Barack Obama, first inauguration. She begins, "Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues." She goes on in the poem to imagine the variety and diversity of our lives as we go about our days, alluding along the way to histories of struggle and hardship and suffering that are part of who we are. And then she concludes with these few stanzas. Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself, others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love, she goes on, beyond marital, filial, national, love that casts a widening pool of light, love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun, on the brink, on the brim, on the cusp, praise song for walking in that light. May we be among those who are walking, rolling, moving in whatever way in the shining and beautiful light of one another's lives, listening one another into fuller and richer life, because we are of interest to each other, can and must be ever more present with and for one another, as well as for every tree and flower, bird and beast, awakening ever more into beloved, unpolarized community of love. So may it be. Blessed be. Amen. Flames extinguished, not the love with which they were lit, not the faith that we carry in our hearts wherever we go. I'm going to sing again another spiritual from the African-American tradition, Come and Go With Me. It's number 1018 in your soft-covered hymn book. It's easy enough to sing, however, whether or not you have the words in front of you. Christopher will be playing on the piano, so wonderfully as he does, and I'll be accompanying as well on the banjo, this instrument for which I am so grateful, for many ways, an instrument which comes from the African American enslaved people who were brought here with the knowledge of how to make not this most recent kind of version, but the early versions which became early versions just as beautiful instruments, which became the banjo as we mostly know it today. So may we sing with gratitude and with determination, come and go with me to that land where we're bound. Come and go with me. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Where I'm bound, there'll be freedom. There'll be freedom in that land. 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 Where I'm bound, there'll be justice. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm bound, there'll be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm bound. Amen. All right then, may we move together in the direction of that land, awakening to the fullness of life, fullness of each of our lives, all of our lives, moving in the spirit of peace and of love, moving together. So may it be. Blessed be. Amen.
Starlight,
Thank you, Christopher, once again. Friends, go in peace.